Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be slightly different to one that you're used to. Now, generally speaking, when I do a video, it's usually a redstone showcase or it'll be a let's play video, but I'm actually in a little bit of a pickle here. I've been working on storage for both Ambition Craft and single player for a little while now, and I've kind of put the Ambition Craft on hold because projects there were getting a bit big anyway. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Storage is a little bit controversial when it comes to a player base where there's more than one person in there, so it becomes quite a lot to please everybody. And I think ultimately that's probably going to be something we leave on the back burner. The current storage we have there is okay, and probably doesn't need too much work on it just at the moment. Definitely will probably be something that we all deal with later on. But I thought instead of dealing with server-wide storage, which can be complicated, why not have some fun and work on single-player storage? Now, I'm probably going to title this video something like the perfect single-player storage, but ultimately that's kind of up to the player whether it's the ultimate single-player storage or not. This is going to be the ultimate single-player storage for me. And I thought the process would be way more fun if I could get you guys involved. We're going to go through some of the options, what we're planning on doing with it. Maybe you guys can give me some feedback on things that should be added, removed, changed. And this specific video is more of an opinions video. So I actually want your opinions on some of the things that I've already designed, some of the things that some other people have designed, and try and get to somewhere where I think would be good, and that kind of fits the build of what we're trying to do. So the first thing I want to do is kind of lay out the goals of what we're planning on doing overall with storage. So over the course of however many videos this is going to take to get to the answer of, we're going to be going over a few things. So the first thing is the input system. One I've already kind of had some thought on, but we'll get to that later on. The other thing is the sorting method. We're going to see how we're actually going to be sorting all the items out. The next thing would be the individual storage type. So this, to be a bit more specific, would be what items will end up in what kind of storage, which again I'll get into more later on. The next thing would be the storage layout, kind of what's the most ideal layout for storage halls and all that kind of stuff. And the last thing, which actually isn't really storage related, will be additional features. So what else do we want that will be inside of the storage area that would kind of accommodate what we would want without causing too much lag and having too much going on in the space that we're going to be working with. So we're going to be running through some of these things over the next few videos, and we're going to start with the first thing that we have here, and that's going to be the input system. So as of right now, I'm thinking of certain input systems that we could be using. The most commonly used one is generally a single speed output where you would input boxes and items will be shut out at single hopper speed. That should make sorting relatively easy, where you can basically just leave it to run. Currently my single player runs on a server anyway, so having the whole thing chunk loaded, even if there's tons of items that need to be sorted, wouldn't be a problem because I can just let it run in the background, so no big deal. The input system, generally speaking, I was just thinking of having the standard system where you would use the shulkers and items all chucked into a single box or a single input. All the items would then be shot out into the water streams at hopper speed, and then all the shulker boxes will then be put into a buffer. Once all the items, the individual loose items, are then sorted, the boxes then can be unloaded at hopper speed too. Now originally I was planning on using Boyan's parallel item unloader, and I did have a little think about it. However, when I last spoke to him, he did mention that him and I can't remember who else was working on it, were working on like a version 2. I haven't seen him officially publish the version 1 in Storage Tech, other than the link that was left in like a Discord chat at some point. So I haven't totally gone for that idea just yet, because I'm not sure whether it's a fully fleshed out idea. I did have a little bit of a word with him, but Boyan, if you're watching this, hit your boy up with a bit more information. But I'm going to leave that on the back burner, which is why we're not currently working on the actual sorting method at the moment. Mainly the input system is going to be a standard input system of working with shulker boxes and loose items in one place. So for now, Boyan's work here is done, so thank you very much, Boyan. If you don't mind leaving, that'd be great. Thank you. We're going to be dealing with sorting methods later on, so they'll either be sorted using parallelized unloading once we do get some feedback on whether there's something specifically good that I can work with. Otherwise, it'll be at single item speed unloading. Considering this is a single player world, I don't find too much benefit in building anything too complicated outside of those. The parallelized unloader is going to be fun to work with, but I think outside of that, the other methods which are available, probably not something I'm going to work with. Another thing I'm going to mention is that I'm probably not going to be using multi-item storage, which I know probably goes against what most people would usually use on a single player. Just something I've thought about a little bit, and I've not been too interested in using. I think it's going to be not the most ideal situation. Generally speaking, I'm probably going to go ahead and ignore that. So what is today's video really about? Today's video is mostly about trying to figure out what I want to do when it comes to box display. Now, I've worked on a few box displays before, which I'll run through. There's some that I found on Storage Tech, and I'm a little bit torn because there's some that I like that lack features, some that don't lack features, which are a little bit more complicated to build. But let's not talk about it, let's have a look at the options available. So one of the first designs that I found on the Storage Tech Discord that I was looking at for something relatively simple was this design here. This is by Experimental Idea, and it's a really straightforward box display. Kind of works in and around where I wanted it to. I just added this hopper locking situation here, just so we do have full hopper locking for it. And ultimately, this is a very manual setup. So when you remove an item, you will have to break and it will dispense itself from there. There's no input detection or anything like along those lines. So one of the things with this design specifically is the input system. So when you put in one shulker box, based on the fact that I've now hopper locked it, initially to get that box out, you do have to press twice to get it out in display. Now, not a big deal, but you know, in addition to having simplicity, we also would like the option to have, you know, some features available with this. The good thing with this is that obviously you can add the waterways for the empty shulker boxes. The shulker box that you have here is available pretty much straight away once it's used, and you do break it, it can end up back in your storage system to be put away and be made available again. Cool system, lacking a lot of features, like I said, in my opinion, but you know, a good starting point, maybe something to consider. Even though it does lack some of the features in terms of build, because it's so easy, maybe this is something we still will take into account. We'll see how it goes. But let's move on to option number 2. This is option number 2 based on a design I've seen in Storage Tech, slightly different based on what they originally had. And I'll show you some of the features or differences in this one. So this one is also hopper locked unless there's no box here. If we take all of these out, and we'll just yeet that, keep one for reference. If I take that out, you have no boxes. It's now unlocked, so the system can accept some boxes because there's nothing here. It's recognized that this still needs an input. So obviously in this case, we can just add a few boxes in, pop that on, and then this slice can now be locked again. And whatever's in here will carry on being in here. If there's any more items in here, you understand how that works. I'll break that box, display another one, relatively fast. Now, the downfall with this option here, unfortunately, number one, again, you do have to dispense. There's no input detection, so you will have to exit the first box that's in the system, or when a slice runs empty and you have to display another box, you still have to press the button to get it out. Again, not a huge deal. One of the things I do like about this is the cover that's raised to stop the box from being shot out in front of you. The main problem with this one, more than anything, is that you don't really have any option to keep the boxes, if I'm completely honest. With this one, you would probably end up losing boxes on this, which is okay for the current world that we live in when it comes to renewable shulker boxes. It shouldn't be a huge issue anyway. So, keeping boxes is not something I'm too worried about. The new tree farms that I'm working on should mean that wood is in good enough supply. Shulker farms can run basically 24 hours a day. These are basically disposable, so it's not a huge issue. But yeah, we're probably not going to be collecting these. It's mostly just going to be yeeting the boxes somewhere or another. Sometimes boxes end up like up here, or you know, behind here, and sometimes obviously down here. And when you've got a whole row of these, you won't really see them falling down all that often. So cool system, is basically hopper locked in most cases, but again, a little bit more complicated, not as fun. I believe this is tileable from what I last checked. I'm 99% sure this is tileable, but yeah, lacking a couple more features, requires a little bit more player input. Still relatively big though, and still requires a lot of resources to build. So not my favorite choice, but definitely still up there and still has some functionality. Option number 3 is actually my favorite option. Now, this is something that it's already been on Storage Discord. The version that was on there was slightly different to this, and probably better because it actually had the hopper locking in the system here. In fact, let me go and see if I can build that one really quickly so we can get a side-by-side comparison. So here is the side-by-side of the two different models. So there's the one by me, and then I think this one's by Monochrome. I just double-checked the storage Discord, and this is the one by Monochrome. Obviously, the main situation here, and one of the biggest differences, would be the hopper locking, which I have thought about how I'm going to incorporate here, and shouldn't be too much of a problem when it comes to locking this one. I've thought of some ideas, but again, not something I'm too worried about. But at the moment, the main difference is the hopper locking with this one. The hopper locking on this one, unfortunately, does make it so when you do want to use this system initially, you can't press a button to release the boxes. So obviously, if I go ahead and empty all of this up and break that, if I put any items in there, if I do try and flick a button, obviously everything's locked. So you can't dispense the first box. You do have to place the first box, which is not a huge problem, which now I understand why this is all covered. And then obviously you do have to also, I think, have one in the dispenser. I might be missing something here, so let me know if I am. But yeah, once you've obviously got this running, it's all good. A little bit more of an annoying design in my opinion, just because of the hopper locking, unfortunately, does make it that way. I guess otherwise it would be totally fine. Speed-wise, all good, no big problem here. One of the annoying issues is that obviously the hopper locking again comes into play in that you have to end up making this one block wider, which makes it a little bit more annoying to deal with. Otherwise you could just have it bare, which I'm not really that interested in. The hoppers being bare is kind of annoying. One of the reasons why I didn't go for this one. So again, I'm probably going to see if I can try and make this hopper locked, and it shouldn't be an issue. The main issue at the moment is the dispensing of the box. So I think a lot of the things that people were doing is having it fall into a water stream. Like it kind of just falls down, so it, you know, if you have a big enough stream or like a big enough gap, it should fall into a water stream. But this idea was a little bit more suited to me, so this one obviously will just dispense the box. You do have one in reserve in the dropper every time, but no big deal. Again, this is a little bit more accessible if I empty out all the boxes from here. Why did I put so many in there? So if I remove, this is a little bit more simpler to deal with. Obviously, no hopper locking makes it so once you're out of boxes, obviously you can just press the button to dispense. And hold on, let me take that out again. So we have no boxes. So now we have no boxes. If I put all of those back in, this should take 2 button clicks to get back out, which again is cool. And I like the layout of this way more. I like the dispenser item. The main issue again with this one here is that, number one, this, even though potentially can be hopper locked, currently is not. And this hopper here isn't locked. Now, this is actually my favorite layout of all of them. In terms of usability, I believe this looks and feels the most, probably the best. And considering the fact that the hopper's available here, it makes things a little bit easier. I did have a little setup where this was locked until the box was broken, and then it was broken in the it was unlocked in the same tick that the box is broken, so it would pick it up. It makes the thing considerably bigger, and therefore put me off a little bit. So this one's on the back burner. Anybody who's a little bit more into storage tech, if you can tell me how I can lock this hopper and pick up the box in the same tick as it's broken, this will probably be sitting at the front of the patch. At the moment, it's probably in like level 2, so I like it, but I don't love it. And if I can lock all the hoppers here without adding too much bulk, I understand there's going to be some size that needs to be added to it, then we'll be good. But I don't want to lose too much functionality in the same way. So I want to keep the idea something like this. When there is no boxes available, then the hopper will just be locked. But when there is one, it will end up sitting in a similar system to this. So that was option number 4 or 3. Option number 3. That's option number 3 done. Let's look at option number 4. Now, to be honest with you, option number 4 will be a little bit different in that this is a design that I originally made for Ambition Craft, but this is one that I wasn't too happy with. This absolute giant maze of a box display is a little bit messy and a little bit questionable and a little bit complicated. A little bit more complicated than it needed to be. We'll get to that in a minute. But this is fully feature rich, which is kind of why it's so big. So without getting into too many details here, I'll run through how this works. It's a standard box display. You remove box, box gets pushed down, pushed out, and dispensed down the bottom over there. And a new box is displayed for you here. This is like, this all gets pushed forward, so you can't interact with the bottom whilst this is all happening. That allows you to zero tick the composter. So here's the features that this has that actually make it an advantage. So let me go ahead and make sure this whole thing is absolutely empty. Let's go ahead and take this box out first. So the first feature of this whole thing is going to be input detection. So once we put in, let's go ahead and just put in the whole thing. System's inputted and displays the box for us out here, which is a good thing, first of all. The second thing is, mostly keeps any items from getting stuck in the dropper and the dispenser. That does over time change, but initially keeps things nice and simple. The second thing about this is that the system's a little bit bigger than it should be because it doesn't hold any of the shulker boxes in reserve. Again, this is not something that we probably ever need to worry about in versions going forward. I guess with the shulker farms, shulker boxes are just not as valuable anymore, so having them no longer being needed in reserve, that same box will end up being spat out over here. Doesn't make really much of a difference. Now, the other thing that this also had was a little system that I realized was necessary at some point. Now, what we'll need to do to show this part off here, it may have been a little bit bigger than was probably necessary, but what it is let's say, for example, this is the only box left and all of this is empty like it is currently. In the system before, if I would add a box into the system, this box would trickle into here. Sorry, it would trickle into here. And then if I added another box, it would trickle into here, and then so on and so on. It would only ever hold the items in chest when you would put a few in at a time. So what this whole system here does was it would let you know that there's an item, there's a box available with stuff in it still in the system. So that way, when you input more items, instead of them being trickled all the way into the dispenser and the dropper, it would end up just staying in the double chest. Obviously, this is important in this case because when you've got a few of them and you don't want to access, you can't access the dropper at the back, you want to make sure that it's still available for you in the front chest. So this whole system, all of this, most of this, all of this is literally just for that protection system. Obviously, this needs to be tileable, so it does take up a lot of space. This is a lot more feature rich than a single player would ever really need. I don't need to worry too much about that anyway, so in my opinion, this is way past what I'm looking for. So I wanted to simplify this, number one, because this was like one of the first ever displays that I ever made, and it was actually pretty cool. I'm pretty proud of it still, but I realized at some point I added in a few too many features that probably didn't need to be there, and this is definitely overkill for my single player. So that's when a little redesign of this ended up bringing us to this. A much simpler, much smaller, and much more user-friendly and easier to build version of the one behind. Similar concept. Unfortunately, it doesn't do the thing where things don't get stuck in the dropper and the dispenser like that. It isn't as much of a downfall for me because, if I'm honest with you, what would be a good remedy for myself here? And remember, the original one was made to keep everyone in mind. This is made to keep me in mind. If it really comes down to it, I can still access droppers by adding in a trapdoor there instead. Otherwise, no big deal. Now, this works similarly to that and has all the features, the main features being in the input detection. And actually, just go ahead and put that back. So the main things being the input detection, which it has, fully hopper locked. So all hoppers available here, which would be this one and this one, I think is the only two. Oh, sorry, there's three. This one here as well. All three are hopper locked. Obviously, this will be a transition between honey and slime. I have already tiled this, so I know that this is tileable and does work. So similar thing, box pulls out and is replaced. This one's actually slightly faster, maybe by a couple ticks. The box is displayed back again slightly faster and uses way less resources. So this is actually my current standing number one. The only downfall with it, again, which isn't a huge issue, is the extra shulker boxes. This actually keeps 2 in reserve, but not an issue that I'm too worried about. And everything else is dispensed out here. This is actually perfect because you have so many options of what you want to do with the empty boxes when it comes out. You can have them in a line directly under it or wherever. You can figure that out. Maybe even a hopper minecart can go by and pick up any ones that have been dropped off. So that's all good. And this currently sits at number 1 in terms of design. Maybe I've overbuilt something here and maybe can be simplified more so. If you do think that you can see anything that specifically can be simplified, let me know. So that leads us to where we're currently at. So this is the current tileable version of the one that I just showed you. And you can see here I can run multiple slices at a time, spam, pick up. We don't seem to ever have any issues. I tested this a little bit. Boxes are being spat out as they should be. This is all being tiled between slime and honey, which you can see here. So all good. This is a very good system. Currently the one we're going for. But this would be where your opinions come in. Do you think this is going to be a little bit too much pain to actually make? In terms of items, I think the ones that are actually going to end up in shulker displays is probably going to be somewhere around 100 plus. So I would probably need to build 100 plus of these. In terms of resources, no big deal. In terms of effort, that's where the thing really lies. But in terms of features, this is probably the one with the most feature rich and the most desirable at the moment. Hopper locking for me is super important. One of the reasons why we moved away from the previous one was even with the few storage slices that I did have in the other one, it was kind of a lot of headache. And yeah, I didn't particularly like that whole system, so we want to keep everything locked as much as possible. I'll be honest with you, the reason why this is a questionable number 1 is because the interface on this one is slightly less desirable than the previous one that I said that was my favorite but lacked hopper locking, which is this one here. So this is my favorite in terms of user interface, but this is my favorite in terms of features. So moving on from this, we're going to go to the very last bit of the video, which is the actual storage system and how things are going to work. So obviously this is the original system that I designed for loading items into boxes with filters and stuff. Just tried to compact it and make things a little bit smaller as possible. This is probably a little bit useless, so I'm going to go ahead and remove this to get it out of the way because it is kind of peeking into how we wanted to use the one in front of us. So this is the overall design that I've got for you here, and we're going to go through the locked hoppers and the unlocked hoppers. So let's go ahead and grab ourselves some glass. So we're going to mark the locked hoppers as green because they're like, the green's going to be the thumbs up here. So the hoppers that are currently locked would be this one, this one, this one. These will be locked. And we should be able to lock this. This is already locked. This is already locked, and we should be able to lock these. Obviously, some of these hoppers will be locked via global locking. So like this one here, that'll be global locking, global locking. These two here are global locking. This one here is global locking. You can see already, oh, this is also going to be locked. This is just an example for now. This will probably be a redstone block that both locks this hopper and then powers this. And the composters, this one's obviously powering the block here, which is powering these two, or locking these two. This one's being powered through here. So in terms of global locking, almost everything will be locked. Obviously, like I said, that'll be global locked, that'll be global locked, so that's fine. The only problem here is this hopper, which is the one that is unlocked. So one of the reasons for this video was to kind of get an idea on what you guys thought on the locking situation here. Is having one hopper unlocked throughout the entire system bad? Is it going to make that much of a difference? Is it something I should be worrying about? Do you think there's a way that I can lock this hopper without too much effort? Obviously keeping in mind that this is basically just a single speed shulker loader with the filter and everything built into it. I don't know why that's like that. So generally speaking, this is all fine. Maybe this just needs to be unlocked. I can't lock it through here because there's a block here, but I kind of got stuck with this one and I was more curious to see what you guys would think. So considering it's basically 90% hopper locked, which is a number that I totally just made up. I don't know if it actually is 90%, but considering it's 90% hopper locked, does that one hopper per slice make a difference? And if it does, do you think I can lock it? And if not, do you think it matters? That's the main question I have for you guys, and basically the reason for making this video. Now we're going to go through the other stages of the storage later on. At the moment, this is looking like it's going to be version 1 of the storage. Again, maybe I've missed something. Maybe there's peripherals that I can add or remove. I'll let me know, and we can decide from there. If you do have any feedback in terms of storage, input, designs, anything along those lines, please let me know. Unfortunately, I don't want anything to do with someone's already done this and here's the entire thing. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something specific to me. So if you've got individual parts, or even like if you have something that kind of gives me a good idea of how things work, that's totally acceptable. But I don't really want a suggestion to say someone's already made one, just copy this. That's not what we're looking for. All your feedback would be great. I look forward to it. Thank you very much for watching this video. Probably ended up a little bit longer than I thought it should be. But either way, hopefully this makes a little bit more sense. If you have any more questions, hit me up in Discord, in the comment section, all that stuff. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.